I always know what I'm getting into with T-Bob. I made it a point to not press record before T-Bob and I spent 10 minutes talking about Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power.
Yeah.
So,
which I'll say real quick, guys, if you bailed on season 1, I get it. Deeply flawed. I think season 2 is pretty awesome. Like objectively, like I like season 1, but I'm not going to tell you should. I get it. A lot of flaws. But season 2, in my opinion, does that great thing that all sequels should seek to do, where it actually validates and strengthens a lot of season 1 decisions that at the time I was like, I don't know about that. So whatever, check it out. Anyway, football guys.
But enough about Celebrimbor.
Do we have to talk about football? Do we have to? Okay, let's talk about it.
Yes, we have to talk about season 3 of Brian Kelly at LSU because Ole Miss is coming in. Tiger Stadium's been a house of horrors for the Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
T-Bob, I know where your heart is in this game, but I also know you understand objectively what the matchup is here with this Ole Miss offense and this LSU defense. But as someone who played a lot of night games in Tiger Stadium, how big of a difference does that make?
I mean, I think it's a massive, I think the way to approach this game is, if you look at Las Vegas has Ole Miss as a 3.5-point favorite on the road. So what does that tell you? What's the old line? It's like 5.5, 6 neutral site or whatever. So Las Vegas thinks they're better by a pretty big gap. But then if you look at like any analytic breakdown, right? Like there's a great Twitter follow, Stats of War. I got a couple gambling guys that do these same sorts of things. I got buddies linking me like, not football outs, whatever. You get the point. Like, when analytics guys create those spreadsheets with like a million different categories, and then it's just basically like, okay, advantage LSU or Ole Miss. Like Ole Miss analytically, they are the better team. They all those systems that I've seen give the Rebels like a 67 to 70% chance of winning this game. So then, how does something that on paper looks so one-sided, how does that go awry? Well, it takes something extra normal. It takes something intangible, something that's maybe not decided on the field. And what you can't test for analytically is what you're going to do in a tough environment like that. And I'll say this, Ole Miss, their first test against Kentucky of the season, F-, failed it mightily. Got punched in the mouth and folded like a lawn chair. That said, coming back, going into South Carolina and a Williams-Rice that was hungry for blood and really just like strangling that game. I mean, just not allowing the crowd to do anything. That was very impressive. So, like you did in South Carolina, that's good. Now, Tiger Stadium at night obviously represents a massive step up. So, like, because I think Ole Miss objectively wins this game. But if you want me to craft a path for how LSU does end up with the win, Andy, to your point, it starts with Death Valley. It starts with an insane crowd that gets loud, makes it hard, and just starts to kind of feed. I mean, look at all the upsets last week. What they all have in common? Home teams, right? So, like, sometimes you can just get on one and you start feeding that crowd, and that crowd starts timing the other team, and weird stuff happens.
So, when the crowd, because it's not an if, but when, right? Like, Tiger Stadium is going to leave an impact.
Yeah.
When the crowd has an impact, does that matriculate into turnovers, weird penalties, ways for LSU to get on the board earlier? Like, I'm trying to listen. It's not our first time ever talking about a football game where there's going to be a loud crowd. Like, what is the actual path on the field to you for LSU?
So again, and a lot of crowd impact is a bit intangible, right? But there are things like, look, pre-snap penalties kill drives. If you are an LSU defense that is already at a major disadvantage and that crowd can create a false start, a delay of game, maybe screw up a protection call that leads to a sack, like that might be LSU's best path to getting off the field. So that's going to be on the field crowd impact. I would say, though, if I'm looking at, okay, here's the path to LSU winning on the field, it is this. Ole Miss leads the country in sacks right now. if there is one thing that LSU's offensive line is still incredible at, it's pass blocking. Will Campbell and Emory Jones, I think, are the best 2 pass blocking tackle combination in the entire country. They should be able to win the majority of the reps against Uman Mielen and against Jared Ivey. The interior is very good at pass blocking as well, and they'll be going against Nolan and Chris Paul. I think they'll be solid as well. So you're taking away Ole Miss's greatest defensive trait. I feel confident in that. I also don't think that this Ole Miss defense has seen an offense like LSU. I think we can objectively agree on that. I mean, Brock Vandegrift, I love how he's improved every week. Lenora Sellers, I love his potential. Not close to what Garrett Nussmeier and LSU's offense has been. I mean, right now, in Bill Connolly's S&P Plus, LSU's number 3 in the country. And then defensively, it's actually not about what can LSU do. It's, to me, is Trey Harris going to play or not? Because this is shocking, y'all. Trey Harris right now has 52 catches for 885 yards. 52 catches. Juice Wells has 17. Caden Lee has 18. Prescorn has 10. 11. Like they are so Trey Harris heavy. And those other guys are really talented, and they will have success against LSU secondary as well. I'm just saying, if you take away that guy, that changes a lot of the challenge for LSU. I mean, that might be the best receiver in the country.
We are recording this before the release of the SEC availability report, but I can tell you right now, Lane Kiffin's going to put the entire team on the report as questionable. So I don't know that we're going to know much after that either.
You want to know something embarrassing, Andy? Because I just figured out what that troll meant. Because last week when they released it, I was like, why? What is he doing?
Oh, he put the whole team?
No, he put 15 or 25. I don't know.
Belichick used to do it with Brady. It was every week.
3 on one side and 30 on the other. And apparently, and I'm slow, but somebody who works with my wife texted me and let me know that it was because people were upset that Ole Miss was faking injuries.
Yeah,
so what he did was
that's why it's even.
I didn't. Which is funny, which is I didn't understand the troll at first. I was like, what's he doing? And now that I see that is hilarious.
That takes it to the next level. I wonder, an Ole Miss fan could probably tell us, it would be he's achieving peak comedy if every player listed there is one of the ones who faked an injury. Right, yes. Just to really just middle finger grip him up balls.
Sean McDonough, who has no patience for anything, in the Ole Miss Kentucky game, got mad because Lane had somebody fake an injury. But the reason he had somebody fake an injury is because Ole Miss was on offense, and the officials had just stopped to, I believe, just check the play clock and make sure it was accurate or something like that. And he's like, hell no. You just stopped our tempo. Fake an injury. We're taking a timeout here.
It's, we used to practice that back in the day. I remember in the Les Miles there, we'd be getting ready for Oregon and other teams like that. I can't remember what the signal was, but there was definitely or if you ever had an equipment malfunction, but they didn't want you to be off for a play. We used to do that. So I don't know. That's a hard thing to police, right? That's always going to be a hard thing to police. But again, Trey Harris, that's the overall point here. Does he play or not?
Yeah.
Because that
did
takes
the same thing you did, by the way. Looking at that stat, I had to stop, reset, reload, go back. No, he really has 52 catches.
It's insane. And that's 5.5 games. Remember, he had 3 for 80-something in the first half before he left with the injury. That's not even with another full game. Who knows what he would have done second half against South Carolina.
Yeah. Well, can I ask another one, Andy, if you don't mind? I like him. I feel like we're vibing here.
I've always liked you from afar, Ari. I love your work.
No, I appreciate it. And hopefully this is the coolest thing about hosting the show with Andy after a few years off is all the cool people that I get back into the atmosphere with. But hey, T-Bob. So Andy and I had a discussion about Brian Kelly at the beginning of the year. I think it was the week after they lost to USC. So very early in the year. Can you help articulate to me, and maybe Andy could learn too, I don't know if he and I are on the same page here. How do LSU fans view Brian Kelly right now? And if they lose this game, what's the impatience level at this point? Are people starting to wonder what's up? Or am I off?
No. On the whole, it's positive. I think where some of the national media was a bit off with Kelly coming into the year is I think like it felt like a lot of outside voices felt like LSU fans were more angry than they were coming into the year. Like for LSU fans, it's back-to-back 10-win season, something that doesn't happen like super often here. You think it does, but then you look it up. It doesn't happen as often as you would think. You know, he had the massive Alabama win, which gets you a lot of leeway here, won the West year one or whatever. So coming into the year, there wasn't a lot of frustration at all, I would say. There was some grumbling about, and this is kind of increased. I mean, you really wasted last year's offense, guys. Look at what Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas are doing in the NFL right now. They are dominating the NFL.
That drives me crazy. It drives me nuts.
Like you had a national championship offense and you just paired it with one of the worst defenses we've ever seen. If you'd add this year's defensive staff, with the personnel they had last year, I think you're talking about a legit championship contender. But so there's some frustration there. I think the bigger thing this year is losing to USC. That's your 5th season opener you've lost in a row, 3rd under Brian Kelly. People have enough of that. And I've been saying this, like, I think that Kelly pointed to year 3 as being the year in which LSU would take a demonstrable step forward, and I just don't see it, right? So I am still personally a believer in Kelly long-term. I really love the process he's instilled. Recruiting is great. There's an excellent organizational competence in the building, right? Like he is a CEO-esque CEO, and I mean that in a very positive way. But for whatever reason, you're a year off schedule. And you can point towards things like letting Corey Raymond go to Florida when you originally get the job versus now having to come crawling back to him. Letting Blake Baker leave before having to come crawling back to him and making him the highest paid DC out there, right? Like you had some original decisions when you got the job in that regime change that you've kind of bringing making Brian Poling your recruiting coordinator, and now then going back to Frank Wilson, the godfather of Louisiana recruiting, one of the best ever, and making it like so. It's thrown off to me the timetable a bit, where I think year 3 the goal is to go 9-3 again and try to win 10 games. And if you do that, people will be happy. There should be case studies done on the difference between 9-3 and 8-4. And now when you go 9-3, you kind of got to push to 10 with a bowl game, but still the difference between 9-3 and 8-4 might as well be the difference between night and day. You know, Black, like it is massive.
Well, Andy, I think this is an interesting thought because at the beginning of this segment, we were talking about LSU and Ole Miss stacked up on taking Tiger Stadium out of it. And we got to the conclusion, T-Bob helped us get there, that Ole Miss is probably a better football team.
Yeah.
And like based on what I know about LSU and the players that they had on the team last year and whatever happened to Harold Perkins on defense last year, like this team could have won a national title with the players they had offensively last year had they had a competent defense.
Yeah.
So I am to the point where it's like LSU, who enjoys the starkest, most amazing recruiting advantage in the entire country of having that entire state to itself, being in a position where we can say in year 3 of any coach's tenure, not just Brian Kelly, any coach's tenure, that Ole Miss is categorically better is just a weird thing to say out loud and be okay with. And
but I look at what LSU's bringing in right now, and T-Bob, I don't, tell me if I'm wrong here. I look at what LSU's bringing in terms of Underwood, DJ, like some of the guys that they have
the 25
on the
class
hook.
is huge. It goes a long way towards calming everybody down.
I don't think people understand
how
big and fast this guy is as a corner. Bryce Underwood's the number 1 QB in the country. So like it feels like the talent part of it is getting there.
The big, I mean, I think it's kind of like how I view now. Well, Auburn is this just like exponentially worse, but like the thing that Hugh Freeze has to hold on to right now is like, look, guys, look at this class I'm built. Like, it's coming, okay?
Yeah.
Brian Kelly's not that desperate, but no doubt the quality of the 25 class really, really helps. I think the bigger thing that LSU did, and the thing that'll have the longest effect on the tail, is the coaching changes made on defense. I believe in Blake Baker. I think Bo Davis is an elite defensive line coach. I think Corey Raymond is an elite DB coach. Kevin Peoples on the edge. Everybody raves about Kevin Peoples. And look at the play of Braden Swinson and Savion Jones and Paris Shan. And this is what, like, you know, I'm too close to it, right? Because I watch this LSU film. I watch a lot of film, but I watch like the LSU film specifically for like 3 hours on Sunday, right? And I go over it with like a fine tooth comb. And there's a lot. LSU's defense reminds me of Nebraska last year, where if you just zoom out and look at the results, it looks a little similar, you know? Still, you know, Nebraska's out here still losing 1-score games, still turn the ball over, whatever. LSU still like not great on a per play basis. Like, there's a lot of flaws. But if you actually watch them and you zoom in, you saw the differences. They were harder hitting, stronger, more like this LSU defense this year. They played with such better technique that it's not even close. It's just that at any given time, they may have 5 freshmen on the field. Yeah. Right? Guys are no longer out of position, but they might just be losing the one-on-one battle. It's not an MA. It's just that they're not quite good enough to keep up with that receiver. So from a coaching standpoint, I love what I'm seeing out of this defensive staff. They just need to get these young guys older, and they need to get more talent in. And as far as, I mean, Ari, you raise a good point. It's crazy that we sit here, but Ole Miss would have made a 12-team playoff 2 of the last 3 years.
Yeah. And they added like Ole Miss spent a lot of money to put themselves in a position where that was said. But like you also said, it's a timetable issue. It's like, yeah, I'm just like, rationally speaking, like that's not usually okay at places like LSU. So it's cool to hear that they're actually being rational about it.
Well, I'm being rational. It's
just a timetable issue. Yeah, it's a small issue. Like it's not timetable is everything.
It's not overwhelming. It's definitely not like overwhelming anger yet, but like, let's see what happens if you just go get your ass whipped this weekend. You know, because I mean, that's all that matters, guys. That's the best part about it. It's just the results. It's just the results. You see it in all college towns. A guy's losing, and next thing you know, there's texts and whispers about, well, I heard he's never there in the offseason, or I heard he's running around with this girl. And the second they get a big win, it all disappears, and it just all dries up completely. Like, that's why if you're a college football player or coach, you don't like how people talk about you? Well, guess what? You live in one of the only vocations where you have direct control over how we talk about you. Like, the myth of America is that it's a meritocracy. And I wish that it were. But guess what? College football is. You win and we love you. And everybody loves you. You lose and you don't. It's that simple.